So I am a global citizen who has worked for the United Nations most of my life. I talk about 193 countries as if they were individuals, and I have to keep track of 10 world clocks on my phone. In the last 12 months, I have traveled to Geneva for World Health Organization meetings. I have helped train women's organizations in Nairobi and Beirut, and I have joined demonstrations at the Climate Change Conference in Paris. One of those dots is me. Everywhere I go, I have to explain who I am. Now, you may think that that answer can be quite simple, but if you look like me and you're traveling in a remote village in Africa, that answer can get quite long. I'll give you an example. So I'm a rural woman leader, and I say to myself, who are you? I'm the UNICEF consultant. Where are you coming from? I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, in the United States. Where are you really from? Yes. I was born in Pyongyang, North Korea, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I do that hand thing where I show them where Ann Arbor is. The point is that I have to redefine myself all the time. And as I go through life, I promise you that very few people actually get my identity right, except maybe me. So what have I learned as a global citizen about who I am? I am an onion with many, many layers of identity. And the real me is actually hard to define because from one situation to another, my identity is subject to change. So when you are born, you have very little control over your identity. And in a way, growing up is a process of making choices that adds to your identity of your own free will. When I was in high school, I was a student achiever, but then came the rebellious days of my University of Michigan student days, when I was an anti-Vietnam War activist. And the one consistent theme in this part of my life was that I was a student. Now, the transition from student to young professional can be very jarring. I remember when someone first called me an anthropologist, I looked around the room and I was wondering who they were talking about. It was me. And my early days as an anthropologist were not so happy. I lived and I worked in the United States, but the universe that I really lived in, the universe that I cared about, and the universe that I wanted to change out there was the whole world. So I realized I had to work for the United Nations. But where would I start? So even though I didn't speak Korean, I applied for a Fulbright fellowship, packed my bags, and took off for Seoul, Korea, and taught at Ewha University. So jobs can change your identities, and sometimes the choices can be very confusing. So my advice to you in that part of your life is to be adventurous. Go out there and explore new experiences. And by doing that, you will discover new identities. And the most important thing of all, do not get stuck. So many identities that we carry around with us are just wrong. Some people think that sumo wrestlers like Akebono are very ferocious, but he thinks he's a gentle giant. So we get mistaken identities because obviously other people give them to us. The question is, how do we react? Are we angry about that? Or are we simply going to let it pass? How would you feel about this situation? When I was teaching at Ewha in Seoul, I decided, along with my husband, to go and have dinner at the American Embassy compound. Now, my husband is my biological opposite. He's the guy on my right. Half of you thought he was the guy on my left. He's the guy on my right, tall blonde. So we came to the gate, and when the guard approached us, he totally ignored Rick. Instead, he turned to me and he asked me for my venereal disease card. Now, at the time, I'm guessing that prostitutes in Korea were being asked to hold health cards to show that they were disease-free. I did not have that card. Instead, I had a US Embassy card with my photo on it that was given to all Fulbrighters in Korea. And he looked at it rather puzzled, but he let us through. The other experience I had was not quite as funny. In the 1970s, I decided to go to Jordan with some Palestinian friends in my new French car. Now, the borders around that area at the time were very highly guarded because a Japanese woman had come in a foreign car with a Palestinian couple the week before and bombed the hotel in Amman. Now, when I rolled down my window to give the guard my passport, I suddenly found that we were surrounded by armed guards. And for the next 2 hours, they stripped my car, broke into every package I had. And when I asked why we were being detained and why this was happening, the guard who had my American passport waved it in my face and said, "This is a fake. You are obviously Egyptian." So suddenly, I was an Egyptian terrorist with a Palestinian couple traveling in a foreign car on my way to bomb a hotel in Amman. So I know how it feels to have a very big disconnect between what I know to be the real me and what others think of me. So what is the lesson here? Even though others can define your identities from their point of view, you have the power to decide what you make of it. And I think one of the hardest battles in life is to hang on very tight to the core of what you know to be your real self, even if you change your job and even through family differences. So how do you peel an onion without crying? What are you going to do with all those multiple layers? I suggest you try peeling them away until you get to the core. And I promise you can do it without crying, and it might even make you happy. When I traveled for the United Nations, I held a UN passport. I did not travel as an American. I traveled as a global citizen. I had to think and act on behalf of every child, every man, every woman, in every culture, everywhere on earth. I had to stand up for human rights, and that right is the right for every individual to attain his or her potential, regardless of whether they're facing violence, poverty, or prejudice. So I like being an onion. And I feel as though I have the power to decide my own identities. But I also have the power and the responsibility to help others be true to theirs. So my parting thought to you is this: if you want to change the world, try learning more about who you are and who you can be.